The Lance Wallnau Show is coming at you live from the Master himself, with a special broadcast taken from one of Lance's most recent appearances. Tune in and get ready for some major revelation.
What happened? We had an ingenious moment in history. I'll tell you where I think we screwed up. I'm just being honest with you. Because the church can't have any agreement on this. The problem with the body of Christ is every tribal elder, it's just human nature. Every guy with a microphone thinks he knows more than the other guy. So there's no humble collaboration among us to find out, what do you got that I don't got? Does that make sense to you? You see, and if I want to have the mind of Christ, I need the 360-degree mind of Christ. This media person here sees something I don't see over here with my church gate. I've got a certain revelation from the church, from the charismatic movement, from paradigms, that I've got prophecies. I'm stewarding this. It's powerful. But I see the spiritual realm. I'm not seeing what's coming economically. I'm not seeing what's happening politically. I need to understand what's going on in media. And I need also to talk about how the heck the devil took over America's education establishments and how do we undo it. To have that conversation, I'm not channeling my infinite wisdom. I'm limited based on the scope of my authority at my gate. Every gate has a view of what's going on, but no one gate has a 360-degree perception. So it requires humility. That's why the key characteristic of the apostles and the prophets for this move is humility, because it means I know what I see, but I need to know what you see so I can add what you see to what I see so I can see the whole picture. That's what we got to pray into. Well, the problem is we had our Trump, but the church did not give God the house he wanted. Lack of unity. It'll show up in history. We prayed in more deliverance than we tapped into. We're like the Elisha, as he's dying. The king comes to him, "Oh, my father, the chariots of Israel." And the wheezing prophet says, all right, you need me. I got some juice in me for one more divine intervention for the nation. Go to the window. Fire an arrow through the window. King goes over, fires the arrow through the window. All right, take those arrows in your hand. King grabs the arrows. Pound them on the ground. King goes. Prophet leans up on one arm and goes, "Oh, what is the matter with you people? You got a divine window of deliverance and you tap 3 times? Why didn't you smite those arrows 5, 6, 7 times? You would have wiped out your enemy. Now you'll have a brief respite. You're not going to destroy them." That should have been the word we heard the moment Trump was inaugurated. These Christian tappers, the Twitter tappers, who have Twitter trauma when Trump tweets. "Oh, I wish he wouldn't tweet that way." We didn't meet the man with the full strength of an ecclesia ready to take ground. If we had done so, we would have had 5 or 6 years of him mowing down Philistines and tearing down their demonic idols. And then we could have occupied a stronger position when the pushback came in the 7th year. We may have been shocked at how much pent-up rage and opposition there was, but at least we would have occupied the high places. Right now, we're under siege, and it looks to me like we pretty much lost every executive order that came out of the pen of Trump, while the church is divided if we should even be involved with politics. Infuriating. You can see why I'm not welcome in every conference. Hey, guy. The rebuke was, "Where's my house?" What did God do? Sent a plague. He sent a Wuhan, and all the economy shut down, and everybody was stuck in their houses. And the prophet, 80-year-old prophet, cranky Jew, comes down. "Do you know why this is happening? Because God gave you Cyrus, God gave you prosperity, and instead of building his kingdom and doing what he gave you a chance to do, all of you went and built your own enterprise, your own houses, your own mailing lists, your own ministries. You didn't get together." Our biggest problem is we have no apostolic convening that has the authority, evidently, to get the body of Christ to meet in one place at one time and humbly have this conversation. Well, the reality is, We didn't give God the house. So where are we? I wrote about this in my book. You can grab my book out there. Apart from the part where I'm saying praying for Trump because I was so fixated on the necessity of trying to get him in for another 4 years, here's what I said. We are experiencing, this is my chapter, the stalled Reformation. Remember this, revival is the phenomena we love that happens at the local level. Woo, I want the revival. It's the presence of God, the glory of God, the angels of God, the salvation of God, the manifestation of God, the healing, signs, wonders, deliverance. Woo! That's not what's going to change America. Revival is interpersonal. Reformation is institutional. You have to deal with the institution of slavery so that your Charles Finney revival is going to actually change America, or America will fragment in a civil war and slavery will continue. This was where Finney had to roll into in the administration of Lincoln. The revival didn't change the institutions enough. Now, Wilberforce in Great Britain, they had revival. They had Whitefield and Wesley and revival impulses and power and surges in their revivals. But that translated to Wilberforce and the Parliament changing the laws. So without a bloody revolution or civil war, they eradicated slavery. That's Reformation. What you really want is Reformation. If revival, which is interpersonal, doesn't become Reformation, which is institutional, if the institution of government and banking and education and truth, telling and media, if these are not reformed, they can be occupied by devils. And after the winds of revival blow, what happens is the enemy comes back, and Jesus warned. He said, when a strong man's house is swept clean, if it isn't occupied, he comes back 7 times worse. So the sweeping move of God that we love is not the solution. It's the sweeping move of God that leads to occupying the house. So when God says he's building his house, it's a house that can occupy the high places in the nation. A house that can administrate in some way over the government and over the culture and shape it. And it can't be done by force. It has to be done by persuasion. That's where media and Hollywood and academia and engagement comes from. It's the power of persuasion. Does that make sense? So here we are, stalled Reformation right here. Can't hardly get to the walls and gates. Walls and gates is a big battle right now. But if we can, the end game is going to be sheep and goat nations. Here's the final point. What's a sheep and a goat nation? You better get this one down, because this is what all the battles are about right now. When you hear about the global reset, economic reset, and about the economy, which the devil looks like he's trying to tank the American economy, it's too bad, because we didn't have to have this happen. We're the only, even though we got $30 trillion of debt, we're the only game in town. Money all over the world is looking for a place to go. It would like to go to Wall Street, but Wall Street, with our spending we have in government, looks like it's set on its own self-destruction. But here's what I want you to see. I want to close with this. This is real quick. This is the highway up into this thing, how we're going to see this end in a positive way. Sheep nations and goat nations are the two contending forces. The goats and the sheep. Real quick thought. Sheep are sovereign nation states. Sovereign nations versus empire. This is the deal. We're in the division between China wants an empire, global dominance. The Islam wants empire. They're caliphate driven. They want to take over other nations. Sorry to say, Roman Catholic Church in its history, driven by empire. The modern nation state, America, European nation states, came out in the 1500s because of a 30-year war between the Protestants and the Catholics. And people say there's more fights over religion than anything. Well, it's an interesting question there. What were they fighting for? Catholicism wanted empire. The Protestants wanted independent nation states. The independent nations won, and out of that came the United States of America. So we came out of the Protestant battle against empire. And now, when you hear the chanting of Antifa and Black Lives Matter and the activist groups funded by Steyer and Soros on the border, interesting statement when they're down there chanting to take down the wall. No borders, no walls, no USA at all. No borders, no walls. This is all the way back from Hillary's day. Think about what they're saying. No borders, no walls. Get the Nehemiah idea? No USA at all. Meaning one big global happy Woodstock, which will never happen. Because the moment our borders go down, every other predator nation in the world will cannibalize us and take over. So, the end game is Jesus said, as much as you've done to these, my brethren, so you've done to me. The characteristic of sheep nations is their relationship with Jews and Christians. They will not openly, institutionally molest, persecute, and harass the freedom of religion. The only defining issue you need to know about a nation is where does it stand with freedom of religion, with Israel, and with the Christians. Antichrist cannot disguise its hatred of Christ and Israel. Jesus, in nations, is raising up nations now that are fighting, and that's why the whole embassy move and the alliance of nations with Israel is so fascinating. Those are sheep nations. You want to hear something weird? There are goat nations that are becoming sheep nations, and there are sheep nations becoming goat nations. Because there are nations that actually love Christians or freedom of religion and Israel that are turning against Christianity. We're watching that in America. And then you've got these Saudi countries, the Abraham Accords, where they're historically against Israel, and they're actually forming peace alliances with Israel. So you're watching, God is right now going through the earth to determine the ultimate disposition of nations based on how they stand on Israel, how they stand on him. And that's the defining point. Does that make sense? So we're praying for our nation that we will be a sovereign nation, and the great issue is how does it stand in relationship to Jews and Christians? These goats in the empires, they will persecute Israel. They will persecute religious liberty. That's the defining issue. These will be Antichrist. These will be for Christ. And there will be sheep nations when Jesus returns. I know we'll have to cover that at another time because the whole world is in the power of the evil one, the Antichrist. Well, if the whole world's in the power of the Antichrist, then how come he's constantly going to war? 3.5 years of him going to war. Oh, apparently he's victorious. Yeah, but apparently somebody's constantly resisting. So there is sheep nations in the last days, so you don't give up on that. The shaking has already begun. Are we agreed on that? Haggai says the shaking is starting, and I think the shaking is going to continue to shake everything Satan does, and the ultimate goal is going to be sheep cities, sheep regions, sheep nations. You got to fight for you. You may not have influence over the country. You got influence in your own backyard. This should be a sheep city. This is a sheep city, and it's a city where you can build your own walls. We're doing that in Texas. We're doing that in Florida. We're doing that in Alabama. Our teams, the Apostolic hubs, are right now getting very practical about what it is to be able to build occupation of territory. We have our own media platforms now. We're working on our own currencies, by the way, which is whole Bitcoin and cryptocurrency. We've got our own teams working on that. We have our own corridor within the Republican Party because we're not going to let it go Ahab. It's going to have to stay vigilant on, and we're working with Trump's team because I believe the Cyrus anointing is still on him, but everybody's fixated on Trump coming back, Trump coming back. The focus should be on giving God the house he wants because that's the only reason why we don't have Trump. We're focusing on the wrong thing.
Very few people know that my buddy Mike Lindell built his business literally while sleeping in the basement of his sisters. He has a couple of sisters. He was just kind of couch surfing from house to house. He built this incredible business. And early on, remember, Mike's a fairly young Christian, actually. But when he first got saved after coming out of drugs, he would wear this cross. And the producers, like the QVC commercial, they said, "Gay, you got to get rid of the cross." He said, "No, I'm not getting rid of the cross." He had warfare over that cross. This guy was marked like Donald Trump from the beginning to be able to do something significant. Now, he built this incredible company, and you know about that. But I'm serious about this. Mike's products on his MyPillow site are phenomenal. And the one that I love the most is the soft, therapeutic, cushiony, warm. You got firm, suede, imitation suede and solid boot bottom slippers he's got. You could wear these indoors. You could wear these outdoors. And it's my personal favorite because when I put my foot into them, it's like a little slice of heaven. You could sleep with the pillow, but you could walk with a pillow. And I would prefer to walk with the pillow. You want to go to this site right now. This is mypillow.com. And here we go. It's www, like you didn't know that, .mypillow.com. But when you check out, you got to use the promo code Lance because I told Mike I'm going to keep him in business with the slipper sales. You can get, these are the low ones, the low ride in the back, but you can get the high ones. I've got both. I've got a pair for home and a pair for the office, mypillow.com. But don't forget, use the code because you're going to get like 40, 50% off of his stuff, all of it, with Lance. And this is the deal that Mike and I have. And I love this guy because he's a patriot. He's not ashamed of Jesus. And his products just make me feel like I'm walking on a cloud.
What's happening with Israel is kind of interesting because Netanyahu was supposed to be moved out. Israel and the United States are like parallel tracks. If you ever notice this, the Jews, USA, and Israel, it's like what happens over here with Israel and what happens with the USA. It kind of goes back and forth like that. Well, I was worried when Trump was moving out, when Trump was being overpowered by progressives on the left and by what I think is the election fraud machine, and the lack of interest in exposing the corruption. That's what always amazes me about Washington and the Republicans in general, why they aren't vigilant about fighting back. It's kind of really weird. But that's Ahab. Ahab is passive. So as Republicans are passive and the left, Democrats, are Jezebel. That's witchcraft. Intimidation, manipulation, domination, and control. So when you have intimidation and control and comes up against passivity, shrugs its shoulders and intimidation takes territory. That's the story you've had with 30 years of Washington. So till Trump came along. So now what happened with Netanyahu was he was going out, following Trump, just a global trend. This way, Bolsonaro, I'll be meeting with him. He's a Cyrus. Cyruses are a type, not people. Cyrus isn't just Donald Trump. It's Bolsonaro. It's Viktor Orban. It's the president of Poland. So you've got to look for the Cyrus types. By the way, the Cyrus types are all aligned with sheep nation values. So there's a fascinating alignment here. Cyruses produce sheep nations, and they align with Israel and religious liberty. Cyruses have apostolic leaders that talk to them, and they listen to them because apostolic leaders have a signet ring anointing to impress these secular leaders with wise counsel that for some reason these leaders can hear wise counsel. Anytime Trump was given wise counsel, he acted on it. So Israel was tottering because Netanyahu was on his way out. He couldn't get unity in his government. So they were looking for a liberal and a midpoint conservative, and they were going to put them, and they were having an election. Hamas decided to attack Israel during the removal of Netanyahu. This is what you got to see that the news will never catch. Not even One American News. They don't get this. Hamas picked the wrong time to attack. It's as though God says what you're doing is evil. But if you do it at the wrong time, it'll work against you and not prosper. So here's what they did. Hamas decided they were going to attack, and they were going to undermine Netanyahu, and they were going to thump their chest to make themselves look stronger. So with their elections, rather than Abbas getting in, they would be able to have Hamas take over the Palestinians. So they had two things they're going to do. Destabilize their own president and move up politically, and do it by punching Israel at a time when Netanyahu is already weak, and now's a good time for us to get votes in our election and seal Netanyahu's fate. But they made a miscalculation, because the one thing about Jews is they can't agree on anything. They don't agree on Orthodox, they don't agree on gays, they don't agree on economics, they don't agree. The only thing they agree on is their own survival and the military non-neutrality they have against any nation that attacks Israel. Because no one can get elected unless they're vigilant about Israel's military independence. So when they were attacked, Netanyahu went from being the guy they were getting rid of to the only leader they had that they could align with until the next election. So they put the election to the side for their own survival. They all lined up under Netanyahu. And Bibi Netanyahu is anointed for war. He is a Cyrus ruler. So the moment that they have 1,000, 2,000, 3,000 rockets, it's not good. Rockets are coming in. So Netanyahu puts the word out. First thing he does is they pinpoint all of the locations where they know the Hamas infrastructure is, and boom, they start taking it out. Find out that the Hamas building, corporate headquarters, is the same place where the Associated Press has their headquarters. Can you imagine the Associated Press is actually down the hall from a terrorist organization? What does that tell you about the media under the control of the devil and Hamas, a terrorist organization? So Netanyahu tells them, look, I don't want to make any enemies tomorrow. Get out of the building. I'm taking it out. So the Associated Press gets out. Boom, he knocks the building down, and they show it. Now, he's starting to signal he's going to go after specific targeted infrastructure. And then he puts the word out, which is very mischievous. The Jewish people did a very mischievous thing. They told all the fake news media a fake story. You should never tell a liar a lie because it's not ethical. So they told the fake news, We're going to be amassing for a great ground invasion. That way we can limit the casualties and we can take Hamas out of its nesting in the Golan Heights, in the area where they're attacking from. So here we go. The rumor's out that there's going to be a vast mobilization of military infantry, so they're ready for it. And what are they going to do? They dug 9 miles of highway tunnels underneath the ground so that they can pop up, they can move around. When you come here, they're going to show up over here, and they got a whole infrastructure of an underground city where they can move their troops. So if you show up here, they could fight you over here. They're ready for this. Also, before the ground assault, before they go in, Netanyahu releases an artillery bombardment, boom, 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 to soften up the infantry. So they know now, okay, the infantry is being bombed. Go to the tunnels because we're not going to have any casualties because they're coming in. But Netanyahu had no intention of sending any soldiers in. You know what he wanted to do? He wanted to get Hamas into the tunnels, because the number one problem they got is civilian casualties. So the challenge is how to separate Hamas from the civilians, because Hamas likes civilian casualties. The media covers it and creates sympathy for Arabs. You got how the story works? So Hamas is told he's coming with infantry, and then the artillery bombardment will precede it. Well, the artillery bombardment happened, but there was no infantry. You know what came after that? Donald Trump's bombs. Obama would not give Netanyahu bunker-busting bombs, because bunker-busting bombs can go all the way down to the tunnels. Trump gave Israel the bunker-busting bombs. So Netanyahu flew knowing exactly where the tunnels were. He flew and bombed and collapsed 9 miles of tunnels. 9 miles of infrastructure. Suddenly the news cycle, peacefire, peacefire, peace. They want a peace. They want to have a ceasefire, ceasefire, peace, ceasefire and peace. Why? Because the PLO let the message go that this was a crippling retaliation that took out not only a significant number of their soldiers, it collapsed their infrastructure underground. Now, why is that? Now, what's the spiritual lesson? Netanyahu ends up becoming, at this point, rallied behind by the whole nation, which was reluctant to move him out at the time they were going to get rid of him. He's got more support than he ever had before. He has the unity because the enemy attacked him at the wrong time. But the enemy attacked him utilizing underground infrastructure that they had been building that they denied existed. And here's the parallel that I think happens. Haman got hung on his own gallows, and Hamas got buried in their own tunnels. Netanyahu is the Cyrus ruler who was on the ropes getting taken out, but the moment that the enemy's attack was exposed and the underground was revealed, it took out the enemy's power and credibility globally, and it took out their ability to fight locally. It could be that what's happening now, in that moment right there, is that Trump, who himself is like a Netanyahu, who is already out of power, that it could be that what the enemy has done in their underground way, and I think the underground is the election fraud, I think if these underground tunnels are exposed, it's going to expose everyone who was involved with it, and it's possible that this whole thing could collapse and kill the credibility of the entire Democratic agenda for the next 2 years. I think that's possible. Because I think that the underground has to be exposed, and the moment it's exposed, everyone associated with it has lost their credibility with it. Make sense? So my word to you is that history is unfolding right now. But I pray desperately, and this is why I wanted to meet with Pastor Tim. I pray that there's going to be an alliance of apostolic and prophetic leaders that will become an ecclesia, giving God the house that He wants. That we will gather with us the apostles that understand and work within government, within media, within business. That we develop a 360-degree net that isn't just driven by the internet, but is driven really by very powerful alliances that are going to be able to go into the local areas and the fields, the midterms, wherever the enemy gathers, where we could lock our shields, form a 360-degree protection around what God wants to do, and then access the unique manifestation of the wisdom of God for that battle. Remember, there's many-faceted is the key word there, the many-faceted glory of God, that now the principalities and powers might be revealed, the manifold wisdom of God. The word manifold means many facets of a diamond. There's a facet that needs to be captured in each battle, and there's no one-size-fits-all. That's how Jesus gets the glory. The battle that you have here is different than the battle that they have in another place. Same enemy, but it's a different tactic is going to prevail. Does that make sense? The person you run for office, the people that you put in there are not going to be the same people as my people. Your people have to be, though, the right people to be able to push back in each of these gates.
You know, if you're like me, you're listening to all this technological input. Now, I'm a baby boomer. I admit that. I'm on the north side of a lot of baby boomers. I'm in my 60s, and ExpressVPN starts popping up on my devices and making a compelling argument that I need to have security. And I'll be honest with you, I'm not exactly even sure what I'm VPNing. So I contact my team because I've got a crack group of producers and technical people that run this whole program. And Chelsea now is going to help me understand, what does ExpressVPN do, Chelsea? And why are we putting this on our phones and on our computers and in our office?
Well, the reason I started using an ExpressVPN personally was because every time you go online, you go on the internet, they're taking your data and stealing it, right? Like they're taking your data, they're selling it to this company, that company. Google's
they?
selling Google,
Oh.
Facebook,
Oh.
whoever owns Twitter, all those people. Anytime you go on there and like you go into Google and you type in what you're searching for, they take that and they sell it. And they start using that to track you, track your friends. That's why if you have a conversation, like if I have a conversation with Mercedes about slippers, she Googles slippers. Well, I'm going to start getting ads for slippers because they see how much time we spend together. And so what ExpressVPN does is it anonymizes you on the internet. So if she goes online with the ExpressVPN turned on her phone, it's real simple, then Google can't track her Googling for slippers.
Oh, is it like another browser though, Chelsea?
No, it's not another browser. It's actually super simple. I didn't realize it was so simple when I downloaded it. So you just download it as an app on your phone and you turn it on and it runs in the background.
Oh.
But it is protecting you.
Yeah, it is protecting you. Yeah, it's super easy. I can even show you on my phone. So I turn it on and I open up the ExpressVPN app and you see green, it's turned on. So anytime you text someone, like even when I'm like texting Mercedes, like, hey, this, that, you know, blah, 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 it's not tracking it. It's not taking that data.
How?
And my favorite thing, for example, I like to watch some British television and I can't always watch it when I want to watch it. Like Call the Midwife. It's releasing right now in England.
Oh my gosh, my wife watches that.
I know,
it's
it's
so
so good.
traumatized.
It's so good.
I come home for dinner and it's like women are in, like give breech birth or something.
I know it's my husband doesn't understand. But you can change your location on here to say, hey, I'm in England. And then you can watch the show you want to watch in the other country.
That's very millennial sneaky of you.
So that's my favorite thing. So number one, they're not selling my data. Number two, I can watch whatever I want to watch.
All right, so you can go to expressvpn.com/Lance, expressvpn.com/Lance, and you can get all these valuable hacks as well. And you're going to be able to protect your data and your privacy, which is increasingly important as we see the beast system approaching.
Thanks for listening to this Lance Wallnau broadcast. If you enjoyed today's show, make sure to subscribe and share the episode. See you tomorrow.